The movie tells the tale of two good friends, Steve and Dennis, who are paramedics who treat victims at different situations. Dennis, on the other hand, is married and has two kids. Steve is 40 years old, still unmarried, and lives alone. Despite having terrible headaches, he has a huge brain tumor that makes his life much more difficult. Steve maintains working and hides his illness from his close friend Dennis. Dennis, on the other hand, is married and suffers different difficulties. He starts to lose faith in his ability to handle issues that interfere with his family life. But Dennis has a good wife. He feels insufficient as a father because of his tense relationship with his daughter Brianna. In short, as they continue their work as paramedics, Steve and Dennis begin to encounter a variety of victims who are experiencing strange incidents. These incidents range from a victim being stabbed with a sword that spontaneously caught fire to a victim being bitten by a rare snake on the second floor of her apartment. However, all of the victims have one thing in common: a package of synchronic medication that was found nearby and consumed by the victim. The situation gets worse when Steve and Dennis receive an emergency call to a house and discover that one of the victims is Brianna, who is now missing. An empty package of synchronic medication is found where Brianna was sitting, indicating that, when faced with this startling revelation, she had assumed in the meantime, Steve, who is very worried about his friend's daughter, rushes to find a store that sells synchronic and buys all the medication to prevent further victims. As he leaves the store after making the purchase, an unknown person approaches him and offers to buy back the synchronic medication at 3 times the price he paid, but Steve firmly declines the offer. Dennis is understandably panicked while continuing to search for his daughter, and tensions rise between Dennis and his wife. His wife, who adores Brianna, feels that Dennis's efforts to find their child are far from adequate and fall short of her expectations. And in a moment of worry, he cautions the stranger about the drug's harmful properties. The mystery surrounding synchronic grows, and Steve and Dennis become entangled in a web of intrigue as they attempt to learn the truth about the peculiar incident: Brianna's disappearance. Instead of giving up, the man followed Steve and broke into his house. Steve knew this, but before he could do anything more, the man revealed who he was: Dr. Carmani. The person who created the medication known as Synchronic. Dr. Carmani continued by explaining that his goal in developing Synchronic was to create a novel drug that was created from ingredients that were legal so that it could be sold. He disclosed that he had manufactured the drug using a substance discovered in the California desert. After the drug was successfully produced and distributed throughout society, the increasing death toll caused Dr. Carmani to realize the true dangers of Synchronic. Synchronic wasn't just about creating illusions. It could transport users back in time, albeit briefly. After explaining this revelation, Dr. Carmani left, and Steve gradually started to piece together the mystery of Brianna's disappearance. Equipped with the final 8 synchronic pills he had bought, Steve started an experiment to see if Dr. Carmani was telling the truth. Steve began experiencing strangeness shortly after taking one of the pills. Parts of his house started to disappear and were replaced by a swampy forest. As he explores this bizarre experience, he hopes to learn more about Brianna's whereabouts and unravel the mysteries surrounding Synchronic, all the while considering the implications of this potent drug that has the ability to alter time itself. Steve was amazed by the beauty of his surroundings. But when a warrior with a sword suddenly materialized and tried to attack him, the scenario took a scary turn. Luckily, Steve was swiftly returned to reality by the effects of the depleted Synchronic tablet. At first, Steve believed it was merely a realistic illusion, but the dampness of his clothing and the sword wound on the ground beneath his feet convinced him that what he had witnessed was true, and a camera was constantly documenting his proof. Steve made the decision to carry out additional experiments. Unlike his previous trip to a swampy forest, this time he found himself in a cold, snowy place. After going through a number of more trials, he concluded that Synchronic users needed to be in the same place in order to return to his current reality when taking Synchronic pills in different locations. The effects of Synchronic only lasted 7 minutes, and with this newfound knowledge, Steve became convinced that the reason Brianna couldn't return was because she had moved to a different location shortly after arriving. as Steve delved deeper into the complexities of time manipulation. His quest to find Brianna and unravel the mysteries of Synchronic became even more complex. They were convinced that moving to a different location after the drug's effects faded would trap them in the past forever. The next day, determined to bring Ban back, Steve went back to the location where she had vanished and took a synchronic pill at the exact spot where she had last sat. However, instead of finding Brianna, Steve found himself in a place where a cult of followers was performing a ritual to summon spirits. Thinking he was one of the summoned spirits, Steve found himself in a dangerous situation as the cultists tried to capture him. Fortunately, he was able to escape and return to reality unharmed. According to one of Brianna's friends, she had gone elsewhere that night for a few days. Later, Steve saw Dennis in a bar. After leaving the bar, Dennis was obviously blaming himself for what had happened and told Steve that he intended to divorce his wife because the loss of Brianna had destroyed their marriage. Steve made the decision to be open about his disease. In addition to telling Dennis the truth, he also gave Dennis video records of his numerous synchronic pill trials. Dennis found this revelation to be extremely shocking, and he found it extremely difficult to comprehend that the evidence in front of him was indisputable. The two friends' quest for Brianna gains new urgency as they deal with the ramifications of their choices and actions in the past and present, not wanting Steve to keep risking his life to bring Brianna back, as they struggle with the intricacies of their personal lives and the mysterious effects of Synchronic. Dennis considered replacing Steve in order to travel back in time, but Steve vehemently disagreed, understanding that his time on Earth was limited due to the tumor he was fighting and that he wanted to make the most of his remaining days. Following a meeting to decide what was best for his close friend, Steve invited Dennis to a location on the Mississippi River's edge the following day. Steve had previously spoken with Brianna there and discovered that a specific stone by the river was her favorite place to be by herself, equipped with the final two pills. Steve traveled back in time and found himself on a battlefield, where he was unable to move due to a gunshot wound to his leg. He eventually found Brianna hiding in a trench and quickly brought her back to the present after urging her to swallow the last pill. Nevertheless, an armed man who materialized out of nowhere stopped them from escaping, and even though Steve eventually succeeded in breaking free, his depleted synchronic pill prevented him from acting further. As they struggle with the difficulties of this new reality, Steve and Brianna find themselves in a precarious situation where he is unable to go back in time, and Brianna is left alone in a different era. Despite Steve's health continuing to deteriorate, for a brief moment, Steve was still able to see the pictures of Brianna and Dennis who had finally reunited. Their resolve to reunite and face the mysteries surrounding Synchronic remains unwavering. Even though he was unable to go back to them, Steve seemed content because, at least in the last years of his life, he was able to give his all for his close friend's family. The film concludes. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe because it helps me create better videos. I hope to see you in the next one. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification to watch more interesting videos like this. Thanks for watching.